Hey guys, today we're going to be learning about public goods and services, kind of versus private goods and services, and how that applies to the United States economy. Oh shoot. You know what? I'm going to have this up. Sorry, there we go. Let me move these out of the way a little bit. Sorry. Out of practice after spring break. Okay, here we go. So the government provides public goods and services that individuals alone could not provide efficiently. So in the United States, we have certain things that we don't pay for privately. If you have to call 911 or if you have to call a police officer because there's a crime, he doesn't bill you directly, but your tax dollars go to the government, and the government provides that service. We do have toll roads, but most roads we drive on, you don't pay the construction company to build that road. You don't pay the electricity for the traffic lights. It's more efficient for the government to provide those services for everybody. It helps society run more orderly, and the government decides that it's worth it to pay for that. And different countries decide different things that should be provided by the government and different things that should be provided by individuals, at least in a mixed economy. So here are the characteristics when we talk about public goods and services. How do we classify that? What is a public good and service? It includes such items as interstate highways. Okay, that is something that, like I was saying, that it isn't efficient for people to pay the construction company, to hire a designer, to hire a person to plan that out, to buy the land that the highway goes on. It's much more efficient for the government to provide an interstate highway. It also includes the postal service. There are some private options, like FedEx is a private company that provides a similar service, but we have a government service to deliver the mail as well. And national defense. It is definitely more efficient and in everyone's best interest for the government to be in charge of national defense and for them to provide that. Another characteristic of a public good is that it provides benefits to many simultaneously. And simultaneously means at the same time. So if it's going to make a benefit or make life better for a lot of different people, it's to the government's advantage to provide that, to make that happen for the citizens. Another characteristic of a public good is that it would not be available if individuals had to provide them. So there are volunteer fire departments, but it's a really hard thing to organize. We wouldn't have a fire department if the government weren't there to provide it. We probably wouldn't have a national defense. It would be chaos of everybody trying to defend their own home, and probably a lot more violence if that happened. Public schools wouldn't be there if the government couldn't provide it. Libraries wouldn't be available to people if the government wasn't providing them. So they're things that benefit society, but individuals can't really do on their own. So we rely on the government to provide these public goods and services. So how does the government do it? What are the ways that governments produce goods and services? A big thing is through tax revenue. The government does hire a construction company to make the roads. They're not a government company that does that, so they have to pay them. And people who work for the government have to be paid. People who work in the Department of Treasury or the Department of Agriculture, public school teachers or public librarians, they have to be paid, and we need money to do that. So they collect taxes to provide that, to build a new school, to buy the desks and chairs and the computers for our school. That's all provided through the government, so we need money to do that. Another way that the government gets the money to do that is that they borrow money. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how the government borrows money when we talk about the Federal Reserve. But the government does borrow some money from other countries, but the majority of the money that the government borrows is actually from the citizens of the United States itself. when you buy a government bond or a government CD, certificate of deposit, you're actually lending the government money for them to use how they see fit, and then you get it back with interest after 5 years or 10 years or whatever the term of that bond or CD is. So the government borrows money from different kinds of sources, and they use that money to provide public goods. They also charge fees for certain things. Some of the money for tolls goes to the government to maintain toll roads. When you pay a fee to go to a state park or national park, that fee goes to maintaining the trails and paying the park rangers. If you were using a government port, there's a fee for that, and that goes to maintaining the port. So it's another way the government gets money. So the government provides public goods and services that individuals acting alone could not provide efficiently. I mean, granted, you could manage to build an interstate highway. It is possible, but it wouldn't be very efficient. It's much more efficient for you to spend your time doing some other kind of job or taking care of your family or other things that need to be done, and have the government, who has much more resources, organize those public goods. But how a government makes the decision about which goods and services to provide helps determine the kind of economy that country has. So every country is different. We have public schools in our country because the United States government decides it's in everybody's best interest to have a public school, but not every country makes that decision. Some countries may not provide public school. It may only be private school, or schools may not be available at all. So that we make those kind of decisions as a society and as a government. Here's some other examples of things that governments think about, and it helps determine, if we're thinking, what kind of economy does this government have? We think about these questions that the government decides. Like, an example is, should the government get involved in factory production to protect the environment? The environment is something that affects everybody. But some countries think the government should get involved. Some people think it should be a decision of the private business owner. Should the government provide public police force, public education, public arts programs? Some countries actually provide a lot of support to artists because they believe that art benefits everyone in society, but a lot of countries do not provide that. So again, that's a decision of how involved the government will be. Should certain industries be run by the government? Airports used to be run by the government. Now a lot of that is privatized and it's private business owners, but it used to be that they were run by the government. There used to be a lot stricter government regulation of radio and television airwaves because of programs, because they figured they're using public air. The government should be involved. Could we privatize the military? These are all kind of things that are decided on the type of government we have. All right, so in the United States, this is how we have made some of those decisions. The United States is a mixed economy. In the United States, private individuals, businesses, and governments share economic decision making. So the government makes some decisions and private individuals make some decisions. Some characteristics of the United States government. We have free markets, and markets are allowed to operate without undue interference from the government. So a lot of our decisions are made through the government making them. What it means that there is undue interference from the government is that we do, in a mixed economy, want the government to be involved a little bit. We do want to make sure that factories aren't totally polluting the environment. So we want the government to regulate that. We want to make sure that there aren't monopolies. That's a lesson we learned from the Great Depression. But in a lot of ways, we want it just to be freedom of the businesses to make decisions about their business, the best way to run their business, to make a profit, to make money. And and the consumers dictate that a little bit by their preferences and what consumers, or people like you and me, want to buy. So the market does work on its own, but as a society, it does benefit us for the government to be involved a little bit. A true free market economy has no interference from the government. The government is totally out of it, and so there could be monopolies. They could be totally polluting the environment. They could be paying workers very, very little money. There's no minimum wage. So in a true free market economy, there's no government involvement. That's why most economies today are mixed economies, because the government is involved in some of the decision making and regulation. In the United States, we believe in private property. And that means that we believe individuals and businesses have the right to own personal property. And personal property is like in contrast to public property. So the school is public property because it was bought by taxpayer dollars and those other ways that the government raises money, and it benefits the public. It's a public good. But your house is private property. If you own your own business, that's private property. If you know, anything that you buy yourself is private property. And we believe in that. In some countries, though, they do not allow for any private property. It's all owned by the government. Your house is owned by the government. Your car is owned by the government. That would be in a command economy. Absolutely everything would be owned by the government. And that includes the means of production. So in the United States, we do have public goods that are owned by the government, but a lot of private individuals own their own businesses. They might own the capital resources. That's a private individual that owns the capital resources. You might own your own factory. You might own your own business. You own stuff for your business, and so that's the capital resources. Individuals can own natural resources. You might own a farm where you're growing crops, and that's your own individual property, private property. You might own land that has trees on it. That's private property. And of course, in our country, human resources are private. We have, as individuals, we have rights. We can decide whether or not to accept a job. So the means of production are privately owned. Sometimes they're government owned, but a lot of it is privately owned. And again, with that, undue interference from the government. Also in the United States, people are mostly motivated by profit. That's the purpose of businesses. They're trying to make money. For the most part, they're trying to make money, and they're working for a profit. Even not-for-profits are motivated by at least making enough money to take care of their families and provide for the basic goods and necessities. But profit is a big motivator in the U.S. economy. And remember, a profit consists of the earnings after all expenses have been paid. So if you own a business, you have to pay your employees, you have to buy all the resources needed to make your product, and then pay for the marketing, all that kind of stuff. And after you have paid for that, whatever is left over is called profit. And if you're a sole proprietorship, you get to keep all the profit. If you're a partnership, you and your partners have to split the profit. And if you are a corporation, then some of that profit goes to all the stock owners. Also, another characteristic of the U.S. economy is competition. We believe that competition makes the different businesses and sectors of the economy work more efficiently if they're competing with each other. So we believe that rivalry between producers and sellers of goods and services results in better quality goods and services at a lower price. And when I say we believe, that just means the government in general, society in general. Obviously, some people do disagree with that. Some people think that Other ways of doing things would be better. But overall, our U.S. economy believes that competition makes things better. If you don't have competition, that's a monopoly, and then people can charge really high prices because you don't have a choice. You have to buy it, and maybe the quality of that product would even go down, but you still are forced to buy it because there's a monopoly. So we believe that competition keeps things better for the consumers. Also, consumer sovereignty drives the market in the United States. That's another characteristic of the U.S. economy that consumer sovereignty does. It drives the market. And consumer sovereignty means that consumers determine through their purchases what goods and services will be produced. So you kind of vote with your dollar. If people are buying a lot of Uggs, then more and more factories are going to be created to make more Uggs. If Uggs go out of style and people stop buying them, then some of those factories are going to shut down and they won't create as many Uggs. Just whatever we need. Right after World War II, there was a lot of need for housing as the soldiers came back from World War II. So there was people were buying more houses. They were voting with their dollar, so more houses were being built. Construction companies were popping up all over the place. The people who provided the resources to build houses, their business was booming because there was a large demand for houses. People were buying houses, and so through their purchases, consumers were saying what should be built. That's consumer sovereignty. So what type of economy does the United States have? We have a mixed economy. We are sort of close on the spectrum to a free market economy, but we do have some government involvement. We do believe that the government has a place in making decisions in our economy. And in a mixed economy, kind of the technical definition, I think this is a review, but can't remember what we did before spring break right now. Anyway, in a mixed economy, individuals and businesses make decisions for the private sector. So if you own your own business, you make the decision for it. When you own your own house, you are making decisions about your own house because that is the private sector, personal property. So private individuals and businesses make those decisions. But the government makes decisions for the public sector. So public schools are in the public sector, and our Virginia government decides what's going to be on the SOLs. The state of Virginia decides what you learn in civics in 8th grade. The government decides who to hire as teachers. They make all those decisions in the public school because that's in the public sector. So in a mixed economy, there's more government involvement than free market, because remember, free market means there's no government involvement. So there is some government involvement in a mixed economy, but less government involvement than a command economy. We do have private property. The government doesn't make all the decisions. And different countries are different places on the spectrum. Some places with a mixed economy have more things in the public sector than we do here in the United States, but they have a lot of things in the private sector, and so it's still mixed. Like I said, the United States tends to be closer to the free market side of the spectrum, but it's mixed. So a place like China, it's a mixed economy. It has a lot of things in the private sector that the market just decides, but the government actually makes more decisions there than here. So what is important to understand about this? The United States economy is a mixed economy. Go ahead and look at your notes and we'll answer the following questions. What are public goods and services? How do governments produce public goods and services? And here are the questions you should see on your note sheet that we will go over very soon. Then what are the essential characteristics of the United States economy? All right, answer those questions and we'll talk about it shortly.